Hey everyone, it's Mary with TABI, the Tarot Association of British and International Members, and I'm hosting our monthly Instagram Live this month, and our special guest is Lilith Dorsey. I'm going to invite her on in just a moment. She's the author of a new book called Tarot Every Which Way, and I can't wait to talk to her. Let me see. Hopefully, hopefully you've seen it, Lilith. I'll check my messages in a minute just to be sure. Ah, you're there.
Oh, I'm here. Hooray.
Yay! Step one, the tech
I
worked.
know, and my lights are back on. So yay.
Fantastic.
Yes.
More importantly, the air conditioning's back on, right?
Yeah, definitely. It was getting a little warm in here.
Yeah. Nothing like living in a city on a swamp, that's for
Right.
sure. Well, I want to welcome you to TABI Live. You've taken part in one of these with us before, and we do them once a month, and we try to highlight different tarotists and authors and artists and people who are tarot appreciatives just like the rest of us. So I want to thank you and welcome you. Um, I don't normally do these. Our chair, Janine, normally does these, but she's in between festivals and other things. So pardon me if I'm a little rough around the edges, but we'll make do.
Wonderful. Thank you so much for having me on.
And happy Juneteenth.
Yes.
That's
Yes.
a
This
that there's a
was fortuitous that we could
yeah
do it today.
yeah. It's kind of a washout here. We're having some tropical weather, but
Oh,
I'm
yeah.
pretty sure that everybody's making do because that's what you do. You just put the tarp up,
That's
right?
it. That's it. Right.
So your new book, Tarot Every Which Way, it's released now. Is that right? I know the Kindle edition has been pushed out, and the hard copies are beginning to be delivered now, right? I know you had a little bit of a delay, but
Yes, yes. They pushed the release date back a couple of weeks, but I have heard that people are getting their copies that they've pre-ordered and things like that. So everybody should be able to get one really, really soon.
well, I'm so excited because I took a look through it, and it's a tarot book, but it's so much more. I mean, I was just really blown away at everything. I mean, your approach to tarot is really a complete holistic spiritual level. I mean, there's like no delineation between life, tarot, your spirituality, all of that in the book. They're not separate. So it's almost like a formula that makes sense if to all of the parts, there's the individual. It's really like the sum being more than the whole of the parts, and that's what I got the takeaway from looking through your book. And can you tell us a little bit about your background and your practice and how that shows up in your book?
Yeah. I was saying it's very fortuitous for it to be Juneteenth, because here I always say ancestors first, last, and always, right? Like, so they're responsible for us being here, and Juneteenth is such an important holiday, finally finding out that they were free, it's a bit bittersweet, but I think
Yes,
that most of the time what Black people do is turn it into a celebration, right? So
yes,
so much of Juneteenth that is red soda and strawberry lemonade and all these other delightful treats that we get to bundt cake, right? All these other delightful treats that
ooh,
we
the
get.
best cake.
Yes, yes. This time of year, just in celebration of all these struggles and how far we've come. And I think that the importance of food for me is what I was thinking about because all my books have recipes in them, but Tarot Every Which Way, really specifically, I wanted to have recipes that people could connect through the food, through the cooking of the food, through the sharing of the food, and relate that to a card and use that in their practice, right? So each one of them has at least one recipe. Some of them have two or three recipes. My editor was like, you have to have the same number of recipes. And I was like, why?
Exactly.
Well, some things like the moon card is going to be associated with all those wonderful, moon recipes that we do. So things like that, and some of them are going to have less. So I just sort of adjusted it and made it work for each one of the cards and everything like that. And I'm
The
just so
recipes and everything. I mean, that is it connected with me. It's like it's food. I mean, that is the
Mhm.
basis of, it's the basis of everything, and it's a magical and a spiritual practice. I mean, yeah, you have to make dinner, every
Yeah.
day, and that can get a little bit mundane, but just if you think about it, if people have to eat, and we have to be fed spiritually too. And so, I mean, I'll get into that as we move through the book a little bit. But when I saw that, I thought, this makes so much sense. Why did I never think about it on these terms before?
No, totally. I
I'm
mean,
sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt you.
no, it's
I'm a bad host.
fine. I came up with the idea for their book. I was probably almost about 30 years ago now. And I was doing a reading for a woman who her child was special needs and they'd been acting out and getting really violent and things like that. And she wasn't really into the tarot or used to reading cards or anything. And I was like, okay, so how can I get this across to her and also her child so that everything will get better for them? And I was like, oh, light bulb moment, that there are things that they can cook and they can share together, and that can help improve the situation, and that just expanded from there on the food level of things into every other thing that happens every which way with this
Yeah.
book.
But a recipe for each card. I mean, that's just I just thought it was brilliant. So this is your first tarot book. I mean, you've
Yeah.
written other books on other topics. Why now? Why did it come about now?
Well, this is going to sound weird, but that's just how I am, right? Like I've been reading professionally for, again, over 30 years, and I wanted to know everything that I could about the cards from a wide variety of inputs. So if I get this card for somebody who's young or somebody who's old or somebody who's this gender or somebody who's trans, like how is that going to manifest in a different way? So I've pretty much been gathering all this information for decades to see how it plays out and to try and figure out what the truths are for me. I mean, obviously, everybody watching this reads tarot and knows that there's a lot of different meanings and a lot of different truths when you're doing readings, but what are the things that are common to a wide variety of people? So that's where I started from, and again, just expanded it from
I,
there.
I really appreciate your description of all the various kinds of witches and how they're kind of almost like a Venn diagram. You can be this kind of witch and also be this kind of witch, and this is where the two intersect. And you can also, if someone doesn't identify as a witch, you just substitute person,
Yeah,
because it's about who you
definitely.
are and your practice, whatever it is you call your practice. And I just it just that, because labels are funny, because it's almost like if you're this, then you can't be that. But you've disproven that theory that all of these things can enter. You can be a kitchen witch and an urban witch and a green witch all at the same time.
Definitely. Definitely. I came from my urban community garden this morning, celebrating, doing ritual and sharing plants and everything like that. So, and you're right, you don't have to identify as a witch. You could just identify as somebody who likes plants or herbs or crystals, and then take it from there, because those are going to mean something to you, each one unique. It's going to have that kind of special meaning, the same way that the cards do. So if you can pair those up and make connections, that'll help you be a better reader, be almost a better person, right? Like,
Yeah.
because that way, oh, okay, I need this influence in my life. Maybe I'm not gonna, pull it out the card and walk around with it all day, although that's an idea. But you have a crystal that represents the same thing, and you can put that in your pocket. Or one of the things I love to do with crystals is get like crystal dust and add that to candles. So maybe when you're setting up your tarot altar or setting up a meditation about that card, put a tiny piece of crystal dust in there and add that to the candle and have that be the energy of what you're working with while you
all
try
the
and
all the layers. It doesn't have to be a great big huge sphere. It can just be a little bitty
no.
chip, and it's the
Mm-hmm.
same. That I would say that, going just back about the description of the witches, and just, I mean, it's really, I mean, I think we're all looking for who we are, and who we are today isn't necessarily who we are yesterday or tomorrow. But when you read that little bit and you realize that you can connect with that and you can connect with that, it's just all part of the growth, which is, I mean, that's what tarot gives us. It's this
Yes.
insight into who we are
Mm-hmm.
and what we think and what we believe in any given circumstance, because of course that changes as well. But just the whole, I mean, it was, I had one of my notes at the end, but it's like, this is like like you're all of a sudden, then you've got at the end, you've got all your recipes and all your correspondences. It's like a reference guide inside the book. I mean, it's like it just, there is so much there, and you walk through all 78 cards. And I don't want to give too much away about each one, but can you summarize a little bit about your thought process with this method?
I'm just, like I said, I'm strange and I want to know everything. I don't know if it's how my brain works, but I like more information, you know.
Mm-hmm.
And most of my students, even in other traditions, you know, African traditions and stuff, we just want more knowledge. We've got lots of degrees. Not that that means we're better than anybody. I think it just means we like to know stuff,
Yeah.
and we like to know
And
a lot.
somebody gives you a piece of paper at the end, and that's validation, right?
Yeah, yeah, definitely. So we all learn a lot of stuff, and I learned a lot of stuff, and I just wanted to have it in there for everybody. You know, this is, I was thinking that too. It almost is, in a way, kind of like a compendium or an encyclopedia, because
Mm-hmm.
it contains all these different areas that you can go into with tarot, you know, and it's not, I think it's what, 200 odd pages, but it's not giant, but there's everything I could think of to put in there. I tend to be
It's
brief.
packed. No, but I like that too, because there's a lot of information, but it's also easily digestible in bits. You know, because what with tarot books, I mean, I could probably name on one hand the number of tarot books I've actually read cover to cover. Typically, you pick them up, you dip in, you kind of look what you're looking for or what's interesting to you, and you read them from the middle to the beginning to the end to all over. So it's possible, and it was very, I mean, I'm going to read this from, because I started into it and I didn't get through all the cards. Actually, that's the part I left, because I want to really go through all of those. Normally that's what I do first, but everything else was so interesting and so fascinating to me that it was also easy to get it. You know, I didn't feel like I was reading an encyclopedia, or that or it went over my head. And there's a lot of stuff goes over my head, you know, and then you just kind of zone out. But it was really easy to grab the bits, and there's so much, and it's almost like this trail of breadcrumbs that leads you to the next and the next. And I'm not much of a cook, but I can't wait to dig into your recipes. I'm just going to say
Oh, thank
that.
you. Thank you. No, I tried
But
to write it like that, you know, take what you need and leave the rest. I spent a long time taking care of young people, you know, 2, 3 years old. And I always figure I have to be able to explain it to somebody who's really young. And if I can't do that, then I don't really understand it myself. So I tried to have it be as simple and sublime as possible, so you could get the concept, but you could also take that concept wherever you need to write it.
it's so important too, in this world of everything's in sound bites, you know, and
Yeah.
everything's in whatever you can fit in, how many characters. And now we lose our audience, you know, after just a matter of minutes. You know, if you even look at like your videos and how long people actually, or your newsletter, if I look at, everybody reads my newsletter at like 50 seconds, it's like they are not reading the whole thing. You know, they are skimming and looking for. So we only have this much amount of time. And I just say, like I said, once I got into it, it was just, you know, of course I wanted to get through it before this interview, you know, so I left what I could, but was just amazed. But like I said about the working with the cards, that whole section is a complete reference library on crystals and correspondences and how to use them. It's just another book in a book. So it's like you can take the tarot bit and just go through the cards and pick up your additional meanings, or you know, whatever it is that you want to get out of that. But then there's all this other research that I didn't even realize that I wanted to know about. so, so
Oh,
I just can't.
thank you. I try. I try.
So you said that you've been reading for, you know, quite a, well, we won't say how many years you've been, but your life, this is your life's work dedicated to
Yes.
this. And we talked a little bit about the book, but then, so how did the book, writing the book, did that change your perception of your practice, or what did it do for you? Oh, I can't hear. I'm so,
Hear me?
I can now.
Okay,
I can now.
okay, good. Oh, technology.
Yes.
Fantastic.
Hey, the lights are
Um,
on.
right. The lights are on. Yay. Um, no, it definitely changed my perspective of the cards. Just it was so funny. I remember talking to Robin Wood years and years ago. I was friends with her, and she had said to me, when you're writing a book about tarot, each of the cards are going to appear to you. And I thought, that's weird. Like, and I just sort of filed it in the back of my head, you know. And it was funny because when I was writing it, my best friend's an artist, and we'd gone to an art gallery opening thing. And that day I was writing about the chariot. And all of a sudden, another artist that's there helping shows up, and she's like, "Would you like to see my chariot?" And I went, "What?"
You hear that all the time, but it's really true when you hear it in action.
Right,
It's yeah. You
right,
see,
right.
you talked about carrying a card around, and of course, my immediate, that gives me a tick because my decks are pristine in the box, in the bag. They
Hmm.
don't leave each other. I don't pull one out, and I keep telling myself I'm going to get a deck that I can, just a cheap that I
Yeah.
don't care
Uh-huh.
about so that I can do that with. Because one of the things also that you talked about is like setting up your shrines and setting up your altars with tarot. And that means taking those decks apart, even if they're only 3 feet away from the rest of the deck. That's a hard thing from some of us who these are precious tools. And I know when I hear about people who have lost a card, I thought I've never in 30 years I've never lost a card. I don't know how you lose a card, or people find a card when they're out. But that's because I think they, like you said, the chariot turning up, they do what they need to do.
Yes.
And any kind of an animistic anyone who has an animistic take realizes that the cards have a life of their own too. And you sit down to do a reading about one
Sure.
question, and do the cards answer that question? Maybe, maybe not.
Yeah. Yeah, that happens sometimes too. I've never lost any, but I have certainly found some, and I've had them be stuck together or something, you know, like, or I'll go back to the bag and there's one or two that never made it out. And you're like, how did this happen?
Right.
You know, it does. It has its own life. And, you know, I mean, people can read the full story about the chariot in the book, but here in New Orleans, we do wacky things. So somebody actually built like a Mardi Gras float that looked like a 2-story chariot,
Wow.
and it had, you know, like it was fantastic on a bike, you know. And I was like, this is fantastic, like, you know. But there was so many of those moments that just like, oh, okay, here's another manifestation of how this is going to play out in my life. You know, it's not the day the chariot shows up as a stretch limousine with somebody, you know, hanging out the window saying Grey Poupon like they used to do in the 80s.
Right.
It's
Which could be fun.
but no, today it's this lovely person on a bike with a Mardi Gras float that looks just like a
A
chariot.
chariot.
And that's, you know, how do you get from here to there? Like, that's exactly it, you know. So there was so many of those moments, and I'm really happy about it, because sometimes writing can get really tedious and stuff. So when stuff pops up like that, it's really amazing to me.
Do you think that there's a way to open up to that? Because I think that kind of thing is around us all the time, but we don't pay attention, because we're so focused on other things. You have any tips for how you open yourself up to experiencing tarot in the world around you?
Yeah, I would say that, you know, well, my first lesson is always like, if you are somebody who does everything very like regimented and by a schedule, then switch it up. Try having a day where you don't have a schedule, or instead of having, you know, coffee or tea first, have your breakfast meal first and then the beverage. Like, just do things slightly differently, and that'll help open up the ways you're seeing. And then the other thing is, forget about it. There's so much about magic where I think when people focus on it and try so hard, that they're missing the point. And when they let their mind focus on something else, then it just finds it, you know. And pay attention too. And I know that's contradictory, but things like, you know, I remember when I was doing my water magic book, like I was writing about, I think, whales, and I was living in New York, whales, like the
Right.
animal, and I was living in New York City, and a whale swam right onto Coney Island. And I was like, okay, well, you know, I don't read the newspaper, but I'd seen it on a newsstand or something. And then it was like, wait a minute, today's
Yeah.
word is whale, and there's a whale swimming into Brooklyn, you know. Craziness.
Yeah, and take the significance of that, because I think that's true with the tarot reading too. You talked about you try so hard, and I mean, I think anybody who sat down with the cards and they just don't talk, and it's really frustrating. It's like, no, I got to get it, I got to get it, I got to get it,
Yeah.
and probably what you need to do is walk away from it, and then come
Yes.
back to
Yeah.
it, and then just
Hmm. Yeah, yeah,
right.
yeah. Yeah, definitely.
So the end of your book was called "The End in the Beginning." And that was something else that just really spoke to me. I'm a Taoist and I'm a Tarotist, and just the idea about coming full circle. So we have the world, and we
Sure.
also have
Mm-hmm.
the yin and yang, the circle around the Tai Chi symbol. So it really helped me connect a part of my practice with. Is that you beeping or
Yes,
me?
it's me
Okay,
beeping.
that's good because then
I
I
was
don't have
like,
to
I
worry.
can unbeep myself. I can get up and unbeep myself.
As long as I don't have to worry about it.
No, my power went back on, so everything is like, possessed by demons in this house.
Well,
Okay.
you are in
Let's
New
hopefully that'll
Orleans.
work.
You are in New Orleans.
It's old, like
For,
me.
I think you have to be open. If you're open to that too, you realize they're
Yeah.
everywhere as well. Because I'm in Houston, and same thing happens in this weird, funky old place where I live.
Fingers
But it
crossed.
really,
Okay.
yeah. But it really, reading that chapter about the end and the beginning, I mean, it really helped me connect one part of my practice with the other, even though I would tell you they are connected, because I know that everything we do is all part of us, but it's also a continuous like learning experience as you grow. So um, the idea of the end and the beginning, where did that come from? Can you expand a little bit about that?
Well, kind of in a way, this idea of the Ouroboros, right? Like we're constantly traveling this wheel of life, this thing that's turning, this thing, the fool being the end and the beginning, and then, the world also being the end and the beginning, right? Like, so if we look at it as a journey, if we go back to that Joseph Campbell, heroes kind of mythos, what we see as we're moving forward is we've learned everything, but we haven't learned everything because now it starts all over again.
Right.
So I really just wanted to leave it open-ended like that like, yes, it's the end, but it's also the beginning. You've learned everything and understood things in a different way when you get to that point, either in a reading or in the book. And then you can start all over again with everything you've just learned. And maybe this time different things will poke out to you,
Yeah.
I mean, that's one of the things I love about tarot, that you could spend your whole life just studying it and there'd always be more things. There'd always be more influences. I mean, darn, at this point, you could get a new deck probably every day for years.
Yes. We've just finished processing all the Carta Awards entries, and the judges have announced a shortlist. I can attest to that. I mean, that's just this year or last year, just a short. I mean, it's just amazing, and it's fascinating because people. I think first of all, it's probably wouldn't say easier, but it's more accessible to people to publish and get their art out and their words out, and it it's amazing, the diversity and the different aspects. And I mean, there's everything from voodoo to Christianity to Eastern religion to completely agnostic decks, and I mean, just that there's something for everyone, that's for sure, whatever speaks to you.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, and just a little bit about the illustrations in the deck. It was really important to me to have both the Rider-Waite-Smith depicted for the cards, but then also a more modern deck. So I used a lot of different multicultural decks, the Santa Muerte deck, Tarot of the Vampires, all of these things.
Right.
We're all represented. And I think, it's important. It's important for people to be able to see that in their cards. I
Yes.
mean, I grew up with Toth deck. My mother had an old one from probably right around when it first came out in the 70s,
Wow.
so that's what I grew up looking at. And I think that's similar to a lot of people, but now you're right, there's so many.
Right. Yeah, and I'm a Rider-Waite-Smith purist just because that's the deck that I learned on. And if we talk about the ancestors, so I've got a huge deck, I've got nice. I'm proud of my deck collection, but I like the more modern take. But I also like, it's almost, if you think about the ancestors, like the Thoth and the Rider-Waite-Smith and the Marseille, there are ancestors, there are tarot ancestors, and they are, without them, we wouldn't have the decks that we have today. So it's really interesting to understand the meaning and understand where and the thought process these cards came from. They've changed over time. They've morphed over time. Hopefully, they've kept up with the times, not as archaic as some of the Rider-Waite-Smith. It is kind of, great big angel and naked children, and it's. But when you know the history and you know where it came from, and then you look at the modern interpretations, it gives an added depth and an added layer to the understanding of the cards. So I think it's important, even though everybody wants to start with a new cool deck, yes, but get the basics down too,
Yeah,
because I think they're
that's
important.
why I had both of them in there. You know, it was really important
Yeah.
for me to have both of them in there. And I'm in a deck that I think is out of print at this point, but I'm in two decks, but the one that's out of print at this point, I was the Hierophant, you know, and when it was a photographic deck and it was so important for me, I'm like, wait a minute, I have to have a book. I have to have a thing. I don't care what else happens in this card, but I've got to have this kind of like hanging lantern. I got to have a book. This has to have it.
Yes. Because that's the crux of the meaning of the card.
Hmm. Yeah, definitely, definitely.
So talking a little bit about tarot and your ancestor practice. I mean, do you integrate the two, and how do you do that if you do? What do you
I
do
have.
readings?
Yes, I have sometimes, you know, because there's always this question of where's the reading coming from, you know, like,
Mm-hmm.
is it coming from the ancestors? Is it coming from yourself? Is it coming from the universe?
Right.
You know, is it from all of them combined? So sometimes if I have a really specific question, like my grandfather was a lawyer. So if I have a legal question or a justice issue or something, sometimes I'll ask him to come and sit with me and do the reading and leave some offerings for him or something. And similar to some of my other ancestors as well, you know, I'll do things like that with them if it's something that I know they were specifically really good at.
Right.
Or then sometimes I'll just do yearly readings on, you know, Halloween, Samhain, Day of the Dead for
Right.
the ancestors, just to see what they want me to know specifically at this time.
That seems to be the time of year that everybody thinks about it. But I mean, they're with us 365 days out of the year. And
Yes.
it's like their birthdays or even things that you don't know. I've been, even before I read tarot, I was a family historian. I've been a genealogist as long as I've been reading tarot. So those two things kind of come together because it's like we talked earlier about opening up. Once you open up, they're with you all the
Mm-hmm.
time, you know, in different ones. And I remember driving into work one morning and my great grandmother was in the seat next. I mean, I don't know, people would think I was nuts, but I just felt her in the seat next to me as I was driving in. So they're always here. We just have to know how to ask them. And tarot is a great tool for that. I know there are decks now that are geared towards ancestral readings, but you don't have to use one of those. You can use any deck, right? Is
Yeah.
that yeah,
Whatever you want. Totally. Yeah, yeah.
yeah.
No, I had a lot, especially during the beginning of the pandemic, you know, because my grandmother always had this story about how she had to make dinner for the whole family when she was 4 years old and she made a chicken. So, and I've always this story about you use the oven and I mean, it's unheard of now,
Right.
obviously, right? But I thought back and I was like, wait a minute, that was the 1918 pandemic. That's why everybody
Yeah.
was in bed and that's why she had to cook a chicken.
Yeah.
So just these things, they've lived through pandemics, they've lived through wars, they've lived through, you know, a lot of the difficulties that we're going through now. So it's really important to me to be able to access that. And you're right, tarot is an amazing tool
Yeah.
because sometimes they don't have the ability to communicate the way we need to hear it, and we don't have the ability to communicate, you know,
Right.
100% the way they need to hear it. So the tarot's kind of like a translator almost, so you can get the information you need and also give the information to them that they need to hear.
That's a great way to put it. Just another translation tool. I'm just going to look at the comments because someone had said, let me see if I can see. There we go. Someone said that they know that there's not a blood relative, but they'd like to be able to communicate with best friends. Oh yeah, I mean, there's ancestors of blood, there's ancestors of place, and then there's
Yeah.
just there. You know, it doesn't have to make kind of any sense at all. Love everything from Lilith. Have your books, and I'm grateful for you for the article.
Oh, thank you.
Yeah, lots of hellos, hellos, hellos. So I just wanted to be sure I wasn't missing something kind of important because people like to be held. What
No.
else? Love your books. They're really informative. Getting this book from you now. I said they were
You
in
know,
the Auburn group when you presented the Hoodoo Tarot. Gorgeous deck. Yeah, Lilith, have you authored a deck, or just you've just been in? You just served as a muse.
I just served as a muse. I haven't authored. I I'm in one deck called the Tarot of the Boroughs. It's the second all New York City deck by Courtney Weber and George Courtney. And I'm the high priestess in that deck. So I was
Ah,
great. I love that, you know. And then I'm in something that I think she's calling the Melonade Stand Tarot deck as the Hierophant, which was an all black woman tarot or
fantastic.
tarot. Yeah.
You see,
So
You see a lot of that now. That it's the Key Tarot. I think features a lot of tarot readers. They've used it in their different ones too. And do you just because you brought up a New York deck? Do you have New York City Mystic? Are you familiar with that deck? I think it's out of
no.
print, but it's an all New York City. But it uses landmarks. There's no people in
Oh,
it. It
oh, I
uses
have that.
landmarks. Yeah,
Yes,
that deck. Yeah,
beautiful,
yeah. I
beautiful.
have it
No,
too.
I
My
that
mother grew up in New York
was
City. That's why I have
great.
it.
No, I thought that was so great. It was really special to be able to be the High Priestess card, and I just did a
Yeah,
piece, a new Aries Witch book about Margot Adler, who's in the original, Tarot of New York City as the High.
yeah.
I miss Margot so much, but that was
She's
beautiful.
absolute treasure. Absolute treasure.
Hmm.
So I just have to say too, because I'm a little bit fangirling, because you worked with Dr. John, right?
Yes. Yeah.
So some people are gonna know who he is, and some people are gonna have to go
Well,
look it up because I just
here we go.
oh
That's a thing that somebody did of when I performed with
oh
him at So yeah, he was like a dad to me. I loved him so
oh
much. And we got to, I did readings for him, and then we got to work together, both professionally and spiritually. And I miss him every day. I really do.
yeah. 'Cause he
Yeah.
really was. I mean, I think a lot of people knew him like from the '70s when you just kind of heard his music, but then later on, I mean, the way that his spirituality was incorporated in everything he did, and I think as tarot readers, I mean, whatever our spirituality is, there's that connection with that, and you recognize that in other people, and it kind of makes them stand out and shine. I think, of course,
Yeah,
he stood out for lots of reasons.
he did. Such a sweet person, you know what I mean? And that always surprises me when I meet somebody. I mean, what, multi Grammy award winning, musician and everything, but he was just so genuine and so kind to people. And I think we could all take a page out of that book.
Yeah, exactly, exactly.
Mhm.
A little kindness, a little grace goes a long
Yeah.
way. That's
Yeah.
I'm going to take that away from our talk today. That's I'm going to because I try to remember that it's not always easy. So, what brought you to New Orleans? Are you from New York originally?
Yeah, I'm from New York originally, Brooklyn represent. But I was coming down at that point. I was coming down 4 or 5 times a year. I mentioned I'm totally a green witch, and I love gardening and things like that. And I'd been back in New York for over a decade. And when the pandemic started, I had just bought a house in New Orleans because I wanted to have a yard and I wanted to be here. My priestess is here from the Voodoo Spiritual Temple. She's 81, so I just wanted to be close by. And it just sort of worked out. Everything shut down in New York City, and I already had a house in New Orleans. So my best friend and I packed up the truck like Thelma and Louise and drove, because I don't drive anymore, and came all the way down here with all of my crap. It was great.
That is great. And you don't drive anymore, so that's interesting getting around. Because New Orleans, you can get around a little bit, but a car would be helpful, I would think.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah. Hard, especially with all the gardening and the events and stuff I do.
yeah.
But I can still make it.
I That's another one of my bucket list things. I moved to New Orleans. I have to get brave enough to do it. It takes a lot of moxie to live there, I think.
It's not easy. I mean,
Yeah.
people message me all the time. I want to be with all the spiritual people.
Hmm.
And it's like, sure, but there's also like red ants and there's alligators and there's
I live in Houston, so see, this would not be a problem. That part wouldn't.
we got a lot of crime, which for me coming from New York, I was like, yeah, sure, a lot of crime. But, New York, we had 8 million people and a lot of crime. It's different in a city where there's only 300,000 residents,
Yeah,
you know.
yeah,
So life gets real rough, flooding, you
yeah,
got it.
yeah, yeah. That's why I think some of it wouldn't be much of a culture shock
Yeah.
to me, but then other parts would. Some of it would be a welcome culture shock. But yeah, I think anyway, we'll see. I'm going to show up on your doorstep at some point soon. But so there in New Orleans, I mean, it's a huge magical community, a huge number. I mean, the tarot readers. I mean, I think everybody should probably get their tarot read in Jackson Square once. Know that that's probably not the best place to get a tarot reading, but you should do it once. But so how do you, as a tarot reader in New Orleans, how do you approach approach that with, because it's such a touristy place too? Do you have like regular clients, or do you rely on just, one-off people, or how do you find that?
I mean, I have a few regular clients, and then I have people that just check back when they need something. I have ones that quarterly they'll check in or stuff like that. I think right now, most of what I get is people that know me from my
Right.
books or online or something else like that. I will say this, when I first showed up, I was like, I'm going to read in Jackson Square. Those people will cut you. Like it's really,
Yeah.
it's
That
vicious.
was always my tagline at work when I'd had enough. I'm going to run away and read tarot in Jackson Square, knowing that that probably wasn't the fairy tale I imagined it to be.
No,
They
it's
will
very
cut you.
competitive, and there's only so much money, and people are not all friendly and loving, and holding
Yeah,
hands and everything like that.
yeah,
So it is really, really hard. I mean, I would probably suggest people, if they were looking to do that, to try and operate out of a store.
right,
At least that way they've got like a base of operations, and. But
right.
unfortunately, a lot of the stores do not pay an hourly rate. You're just working on
Waiting
commissions.
for someone to come in,
So
and
you're
kind of,
waiting for
yeah,
somebody to get
yeah.
there and sitting there for
Well,
whatever.
we know that tarot is a tough way to make a living. I mean, you got to layer it in with other stuff. You've got to layer it in with
Oh,
other
yeah,
stuff. Yeah, yeah.
definitely. Oh, there's always that one in a miracle. I had somebody say to me probably 20 years ago that they were going to move to New Orleans, be a reader in Jackson Square and do great. And they are still there. They have been there for 20 years. Every time I walk through Jackson Square, they're still there. They live down the street, and some people can make it work, but know that it's just one in a
Yeah.
million.
Like your dreams of going to Hollywood, that kind of a thing.
Sure.
Yeah, it's
Yeah.
not impossible. But so
And they're not
what
rich
no,
either.
no,
I mean,
that's
they're
yeah.
like, I'll be
Yeah.
a reader and I'll make all this money.
No.
No.
There's lots of working readers, not very many rich readers.
Yes. Yes. Yes.
So what's next for you? I mean, okay, so you've written this book, and does it feel like an anticlimactic, or is it prompted you on to do something more, or?
Oh, I'm definitely going to do more. I mean, originally what I wanted this to be was an art show. So you could move through the car and then, eat the food and hear the musical notes, smell the scents from the aromatherapy, or maybe see some of the plants or something like that. And that's really what I wanted to do. If any gallery owners are out there, I did do,
That would be fantastic.
right? Right. I did do a deck that went with it originally, but it's not published as part of this project. But it was collages based on, my experience with tarot and things like that, based on Hodorowski's work in a large way, because it was sort of like a shock value type tarot deck where it
Right.
was Harpo Marx is in it and all these like pop culture figures and stuff like that. So it wouldn't really work copyright wise for me to do it as a deck, but it would work as an art show to do it as one-off pieces to work
Right.
through. So I'm hoping that that'll work. But having a book is in so many ways like having a baby for everybody who's out there and had a baby. So
Are you saying that you forget about the pain and you want to do it again after a certain amount of time?
want to do it again, and then for some point you've got to just let it go and be out there, but you also have to nurture it when it's young. So since I'm still 2 weeks out, it'll probably be a good another year of me
Yeah.
doing different events and promotions and things like that. One of the things that I'm doing with this book, which I'm so excited about, is doing tarot events where they're not just book signings, but you can go and we're going to go to a bar or a restaurant and you can have one of the drinks and you can have some of the food and you can, hopefully I'll get tarot readers to give readings while they're there. So it's really like an event people are going to, as
Yeah.
opposed to just let me stand in line and get my book
Yeah.
signed. It's going to be
Yeah. So
a party.
where will those just be in New Orleans? Or are you going to take that on the road, or?
We've got some coming up in New Orleans. I'm going to do some in New York City. One of my favorite stores in New York City is Enchantments, and next door they have a dry bar called Hecate. So I've been in negotiations with those people about doing that, hopefully in September, but everything will be on my website. And I'm still looking for other sites. It's just a matter of, can we make it work?
Right. That sounds like a fast. My brain's already thinking about where in Houston could you do that? Where in Houston could you
Yeah,
do that?
yeah, no. If anybody's got a venue or something that they would love to see that happen, let me know.
Yeah.
We can make
I'm
it.
just, yeah. I'm just thinking there isn't an artist like anyway, we'll talk about that offline. Selfishly, I would like for you to come here.
Yeah, that'd be
But
great.
that's really that's an I don't think, and it's that's very much like the book, because I don't want to say there's no other book like your book, because I mean there's lots of special books, but really and truly there are so many aspects of this book that are very different from just your standard tarot definitions and readings and that sort of a thing. There's kind of the why behind it, and a deeper understanding about how you tie these things together that I just found so fascinating. So what would you like someone to take away from your book? What would you, if you, what do you want them to
Not
understand?
to be afraid of it, I mean, again, I'm of a certain age, so I think there's like a stigma attached to it, and the media hasn't helped with that at all. So either if you're starting out, not to be afraid about, oh, I didn't memorize everything back to front and everything, you can still interact with it, and if you've had some negative experiences, there's also ways you're in control of that, and you can sort of guide your readings in the direction that's going to be most helpful for you.
Right.
One of, I think, the best things I ever learned as a reader was, if somebody's really nervous, to just sit down and have a conversation with them and just put it out into the universe, that if there's something they can't deal with or something that might be too difficult, then that's going to stay outside of this reading. And we're going to focus on what they do need to hear, and what they'll be blessed and improved to hear in that reading. So that, I think, is just something that people don't think of. But once I started doing that, it got so much better.
That's a really great tip too for anybody watching, because that is, I mean, that's one of the things you either, I mean, there are different kinds. There's people who are very open and people who are a little tentative, and then there are people who are completely closed off at a reading.
Mm-hmm.
And
Yes.
that doesn't help either. I'm just trying to get the comments to go away so I can see you. Oh, and I hit a button I didn't mean to hit. Technology. But I think that's a great takeaway, and setting the parameters, like you do with any kind of spiritual work. I mean,
Sure.
you cast your circle, you set your parameters, you allow what you want to allow in, and then everything else has to stay away. And
Mm-hmm.
so it's all part of this holistic approach, which was my real takeaway from this book. And not my first read. I mean, I'm going to spend a lot of time with this because there's so much there, but just immediately it was like wrapping yourself in this blanket of all these practices and the reason why they connect together, the reason why they're there. And it inspired me, like I said, to try the cooking. Now, oils and stuff I don't really make oils. I don't have a chemist's kitchen. I don't even have any kind of a, anyway, I would blow something up. I mean, that just, so we're going to leave that to the professionals.
Okay.
But anyway, so let me just look to see if anybody had any questions while we were doing this.
Yeah,
It's hard
somebody
to
had
see.
about Lady Rhea at
Mm-hmm.
Enchantments.
Yeah.
Is my understanding that Rhea is not at Enchantments anymore. It is owned by a fantastic person named Stacy. Rhea is still doing readings in different parts of the greater New York City area.
I think that was it. That was lots of hellos and lots of people excited about your book. So we're going to watch for your art installations, which you'll put up on your website, and I will put links and everything up on the video, when I post it, so that people know how to find you. I'll put your different channels and stuff up, and I think they can find you through Instagram, and I'll put your website up. But I this has been absolutely great. I'm so excited about this book. I mean, it just kind of tied everything together for me, the ancestor workings, and which I've done without having a real guide. So this has been really, really helpful for me. I hope for someone else too.
Yeah,
So
too. Thank you so much. It was lovely. I hope people enjoy the book. I mean, we didn't even get to it because there's so much in there, but there's also advice from some of the top readers and psychics from around the world. People like Matt Oren, Dorothy Morrison, so many. Like, I can't even think of them all because there's so many people. Again, I think there's a lot of different ways to approach it, and it was really valuable to me to have those people's input. Courtney Alexander from Dust to Onyx Tarot, so many different voices in there in addition to mine. So even if you don't like anything I have to say, there's all these other people in there saying stuff too. So
And you were very gracious, and there was I saw there was a lot included. I wanted to focus on your, because this is your book, and but yeah, Tracy Quinlan, I'm excited for the book. Yeah, you need to be excited. You should be excited for the book because it's just fantastic. And I'm not, like I said, the whole thing with the recipes and the core. I mean, there's lots of with correspondences and the crystals and everything, but I really appreciated, like I said, how it all tied together and
yeah,
understanding how it all tied together. So
yes,
yeah,
yes. Oh, someone's late. What's the book about? Oh, look, it's
uh,
backwards. Tarot every which way.
tarot every which way.
WITCH. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah. And it's a holistic approach to your tarot reading. Feed your body, feed your soul, feed your ancestors, right?
Yes, feed everybody. Have a big party and make a whole bunch of recipes for people that are coming over. You know, I did a interview the other day with people that were going to do a potluck where everybody made a different recipe from the book and brought that
Great
together.
idea.
I was like,
Yeah.
so
Great idea
wonderful. Yay.
yeah, because it's perfect for like book club like
Mm-hmm.
that. Everybody brings something, or everybody bring different oils and that sort of thing. Now Jolie says she's new to tarot, only, or I think I can't see, they are new to tarot, only practicing for less than a year. I think what you want to give some input about how this book is for beginners.
Yeah, I think it's great for beginners because, again, it has the basic springboard understanding things you need to know about the card, but then there's also meditation. So you can sort of do a mind palace and walk into the card and really look around and see what's in that card and how it relates to you. There's crystals, as we were just talking about, there's sacred gardens, there's, you know, food, there's everything you can think of relating to the cards. And then it gives you a better understanding of, you know, because sometimes, especially when you're starting out, you're like, what's this card mean? That doesn't make any sense to me, you know, but you know how you feel when you hold this crystal, you know how you feel when you eat this food, you know how you feel when your body resonates with a certain musical note, and that's the feeling of the card. And when you understand that, then you can expand on the shorthand knowledge that you get from the basic book.
And then maybe take the deeper dive, like you talked about, journeying with the cards.
Mm-hmm.
And
Yeah.
that's, I mean, it's not, a beginner can certainly do it, but having a little bit of background is always a good idea before you trek off with the devil, you know, or whatever.
Yeah, I put warnings in for all of the more challenging cards. That's how I'm going to say that, because I don't think anything's, you know, inherently negative, but certain things are definitely more challenging, more difficult to look at. So I would be cautious before you do that, you know. Yeah.
Little knowledge, and there's a lot of knowledge in your book. There's a lot of ground covered, and I'm so excited. I'm so excited for just to watch it get out into the world
Me too.
and hear the feedback about it, and hopefully talk to you some more about it in the future.
Oh, that sounds great. Great. That sounds absolutely wonderful. And I've got free stickers. So anybody want to hit me up on social
Ooh,
media, there's free stickers, and I will send them out to you.
and I love stickers.
Me too.
I'll be hitting you up.
Me too. All my marketing people are like, you want what? And I'm like, stickers?
People like stickers. Yeah,
People love stickers.
we're all still
Oh,
four. That's
yeah, definitely.
great. Great. Okay, well, I think we got all the questions and stuff, and I think I've covered a lot of ground. I don't think I missed anything on my notes, so I think that, yeah, like we could cover the whole book. But like I said, I'll put up some links in the body of the text when I post the video, and when I put it, it'll be on YouTube later. So I'll post the link to that, and hopefully people can catch us on the rewind if they didn't catch us today.
Fantastic.
Yeah.
Thank you so
Thank you
much.
so much for joining.
Thank you, everybody who said they just bought it. Yay.
Okay. Talk to you soon because that's a given.
Okay. Yes. Take care.
Bye-bye. Bye, everybody.